the new Superman movie just came out, so you know what? I'm gonna celebrate by talking about a Batman video game, because, I don't know, Batman's just a better DC superhero, leave me alone. Now I'm sure at this point everyone knows who Batman is. He's been around for 80 plus years, and since then has had countless movies, TV shows, and more importantly, video games. Unfortunately though, Batman has never had a particularly great track record of success when appearing in other mediums outside of comics, and this was very apparent, especially when it came to the video games he appeared in. While you could always count on having a decent Batman movie or TV show here and there, Batman's run in video games was usually an absolute disaster. For some reason, game studios just never knew how to properly adapt Batman into video game form, and you know what? I just don't understand that. He's literally just a billionaire who wears a batsuit and fights crime, among other things. You know it's bad when the first truly great Batman game was a Lego game of all things. Thankfully, the dream of a legitimately good Batman game wouldn't die, as thanks to a little studio known as Rocksteady, they would give us what is still to this day one of the greatest Batman games ever made. Now if you saw the thumbnail and read the title, you know I'm of course talking about Batman Arkham Asylum, because come on, what else would it have been? You're not clicking on this video expecting me to talk about Lego Batman, are you? Released in August of 2009, Arkham Asylum literally redefined the superhero genre of video games, as not only was it incredibly well made and showed that good superhero games can exist, but its gameplay was so good for the time that parts of it went on to be used in future titles such as the Middle-earth games, the Insomniac Spider-Man series, and that Captain America MCU game that everyone played once when it came out and forgot about years later. Arkham Asylum's gameplay though is just one small little piece in what makes the game so great. So without further ado, let's glide in and find out what made Batman Arkham Asylum so awesome. Now before I dive into the gameplay, I want to start off by talking about the story, because I feel like it's simultaneously the weakest and strongest part of this game. What do I mean by that exactly? Well, the story itself really isn't anything special. Joker is taken prisoner into Arkham Asylum by Batman, which then becomes a disaster when Joker manages to break free and begins his plan to take over Arkham Asylum. Joker's whole plot in this game is that he's after something called Titan, which creates these hideous monsters when injected into a human being. The story is super predictable, and it's full of characters that you really just do not care about, as some of them are never given enough time to really be fleshed out. For example, an hour or so into the game, you save a couple of doctors, one of which is Dr. Young, who has research on the Titan formula that Joker is after. You hardly interact with her enough in the game to really care about her, and then before you know it, she's fucking dead. The shallow side characters and the predictable nature of the plot are the only glaring weaknesses of the whole story, as everything else is fucking awesome. There's never a dull moment in this game whatsoever, even in the slower parts. A lot of the reason why this game's story shines as much as it does is due to the excellent cast. You of course have the legendary Kevin Conroy as Batman, Arlene Sorkin as Harley Quinn, and Mark Hamill as Joker, all of whom starred in Batman the Animated Series. All of their performances combined do so much to add to the overall experience and really elevate the story to a higher level. While we're on the topic of things that elevate the story, we need to talk about the level design and atmosphere of this game. Arkham Asylum's level design is very much of the Metroidvania variety, as you're constantly going back and forth between areas and tight-knit maps in order to complete different objectives. Traversing Arkham Asylum can feel like you're running through a maze at times if you don't know where you're going, but I think that's what makes the asylum such a good setting for this game. The atmosphere throughout the game is always dark, unnerving, and is always leaning heavily towards horror, so running through the walls of the asylum and getting lost can be pretty terrifying. As you progress through the game, you can occasionally visit the visitor center, and it's here where you really get to hear from Joker a lot more than you would normally. But it's done in such a way that invokes fear in the player, and it does such a good job at showing you just how intimidating Joker really is in this game. Honestly, this game does such a good job at being a horror game that it may even be better than some actual horror games. Now, is it the scariest game of all time? No, far from it. But this is a game that can definitely be pretty eerie, especially when you play it at night. Whether it's the ominous sounds of the asylum constantly playing and changing in tone over the course of the game as Joker takes over, or Scarecrow being an absolute menace by making you think your game crashed, this game is its fair share of scary surprises. Speaking of Scarecrow, let's talk about him for a minute, shall we? Scarecrow is essentially the secondary boss of this game, and the stuff he does is just nuts. The part when Batman enters the morgue and sees his dead parents as a result of inhaling the fear toxin is one of the creepiest moments I've ever seen in a superhero game. The voices whispering at you, telling you to get out, make it all the more unnerving as well. On top of that, Scarecrow's boss fights are really cleverly designed in this game, and as you'll soon find out, he's one of the only characters with a good boss fight at all in this entire game. Essentially, his fights just boil down to being simple platforming sections while also having you stay out of his gaze, otherwise you die. All of these sections are designed really well and will usually have you utilizing one of Batman's many gadgets to progress through them. The Scarecrow levels have always been my favorite part of Arkham Asylum as they're just so damn creative. The same cannot be said, however, for the rest of the boss fights. Harley Quinn's fight, if you could even call it that, is literally just you fighting a bunch of Joker's henchmen while also trying to avoid getting electrocuted by Harley in the process. Once you win, Harley gets beat in a cutscene. Bane's boss fight is by far the worst, as his fight is the exact same as the many Titan henchmen you'll fight throughout the game. Just dodge, throw a batarang, perform a beatdown, rinse and repeat, and then win. Poison Ivy's fight just has you guessed it, occasionally fighting a bunch of henchmen until you get an opportunity to attack Ivy herself. You do have to dodge Ivy's plants and floating orbs in the process, but it's still an incredibly basic and uninteresting fight. It is more creative than Bane's boss fight, I'll at least give it that, but it still just consists of nothing more than throwing a batarang over and over again. Killer Croc's boss fight is, in my opinion, the second best fight in the entire game next to Scarecrow's, as it sees you traversing through his lair quietly and occasionally knocking him out with a batarang. It's simplistic, sure, and if you know what you're doing, it's a fight that can be over super quick, but it's legitimately terrifying as you never know when Croc is gonna show up. Honestly, the only downside to this level is that it's incredibly slow, but that's about it. Then on the other hand, there's the Joker boss fight. Where do I even begin? So instead of getting to fight Joker normally at the end of the game, you end up having to fight him in his Titan form, and literally all you do is pull him down with your Batclaw to beat him up. You do this 3 times and then the game ends. You don't even get to do anything once you pull him down the 3rd time, as it just immediately goes into a cutscene. Look at any review for this game and everyone will tell you the same thing. Everything leading up to this final boss is excellent, well crafted, and well executed. But once you get to fight the Joker, it all just kind of falls apart, especially because just before you even fight him, you take on 2 Titan henchmen at the same time, and it isn't even really that challenging. I really just think it would have been better if we could have fought Joker normally instead, rather than fighting him in his dumbass Titan form. Now I'm sure there's someone out there who enjoys this boss fight, and if there is, well, not anymore! This is, in my opinion though, one of the biggest weak points of the game. However, the rest of the game is so incredibly strong that it really doesn't matter all that much. The story, while incredibly simple and predictable, is so engaging and entertaining that it really doesn't even matter. And when it comes to Arkham Asylum and the Arkham games in general, the story is nothing in comparison to the work of art that is the overall gameplay. When it comes to superhero games, the most important thing that they should get right is giving you that feeling of power of whatever superhero you're playing as. That's why games like Arkham Asylum work, and why games like Superman 64 make me feel nothing but sadness. Arkham Asylum's gameplay is the definition of perfection, and at times feels like an actual Batman simulator. First of all, the combat in this game is absolutely outstanding. The free flow combat system, as it's called, is exactly what the name implies. You can freely beat up enemies in whatever fashion or order you like, and it all flows together so nicely. Now, for the most part, the combat just requires you to press X to strike and Y to counter, but the game does mix in a few different enemies to shake that up a bit every once in a while. Titans will require you to throw batarangs and dodge, as I mentioned earlier, while henchmen with bladed weapons will need to be cape stunned first before you can attack them. The combat is largely combo based, so the higher your combo, the more points you'll be rewarded for upgrading Batman's various abilities. The upgrade system in this game is fairly straightforward, as as it just allows you to upgrade Batman's health and various gadgets, making them more useful in different combat scenarios. Speaking of the gadgets, there's quite a bit of them in this game, all of which are equally as useful. The gadgets are primarily used for unlocking secrets or just unlocking new areas to progress through the story, but like I mentioned very briefly a little bit ago, some of the gadgets can even be used in combat, such as the Batclaw and the Explosive Gel. Now very rarely do I ever use Explosive Gel in any situation where I'm not outright required to, but the Batclaw on the other hand can be really useful in situations where there's a lot of enemies. Outside of the gadgets, another important gameplay mechanic is detective mode, and just hear me out for a second when I say this, detective mode in this game isn't all that great. Now I do think it's neat, don't get me wrong, and it does do its job at highlighting important story objectives and making it easier to find collectibles, but my god, do I need to get flashbanged every time I enable it? And to make things worse, the blue highlight completely covers up the visual aesthetic of the asylum, which takes so much away from the overall experience. You spend a considerable amount of time in detective mode too, especially when in a stealth section. While we're on the topic of stealth in this game is actually really enjoyable. It's also about 60% of the entire game, so if it sucked, I'd be pretty concerned. The stealth sections are definitely where this game shines the most, as for the most part, you're given full freedom as to how you want to go about doing them. You could do a stealth section the easy way and just stay atop the gargoyles the entire time, or if you want to challenge yourself, you could stay on the ground and take down enemies from behind. Over time, more elements are thrown in to make stealth more challenging, like bombs being put on the gargoyles or the enemies having security collars, and because of that, it helps keep stealth from getting boring throughout your playthrough. You know what is boring though? Hunting down all of the collectibles in this game. Now don't get me wrong, for some people this is the most fun part of the game, but in my opinion, hunting down every Riddler trophy, Spirit of Arkham symbol, or even the interview tapes has always been exhausting, tedious, and not fun. All of the collectibles are cool, but man, there's simply too many for me to ever worry about collecting. And I know what you're thinking. What's the reward for collecting the collectibles in this game? Challenge maps. You get challenge maps. These are just locations from the story that have you either fighting waves of enemies while you try to survive for as long as possible, or stealth challenges, which are pretty self-explanatory. You can play as the Joker in the challenge maps though, which is pretty damn cool. Anyways, I think I've yapped enough about Arkham Asylum for today, so let's cut to the conclusion, shall we? All in all, Batman Arkham Asylum is a legendary superhero game, and even 16 years after its initial release, deserves all the praise in the world for doing what the rest of the games industry couldn't do, which has proved that good Batman and superhero video games in general could exist. Hell, it even received a remaster in 2016 in the form of Return to Arkham Asylum. This game is still the golden standard for superhero video games for a reason, and it shows that when you have a talented development team like Rocksteady that has a perfect understanding of the character being adapted into video game form, that something good can always come out of it. I'm sorry I said anything.